I planned to reclaim my father's inheritance that was left to a stranger, until a family secret changed everything. I always believed that when the time came, my father's will would take care of me, that his careful planning and quiet way of doing things meant I'd be secure, that all his hard work would somehow land in my hands, and I'd carry the family name forward like he would have wanted. But everything changed the day we sat in that lawyer's office. The room was cold, both in temperature and atmosphere. The blinds were half closed. The coffee on the table had long gone stale, and the air smelled faintly of dust and paper. I sat beside my grandmother, Loretta, dressed in her usual pressed suit, her posture perfectly straight as always. She had prepared for this moment like it was a business meeting. That morning, she'd looked at me with a determined expression and said, "You'll invest the money wisely, Mona. This is your chance to restore our name. Your father worked hard for this," and I believed her. Loretta had always carried herself with certainty. Since my mother died, she'd stepped in like a force of nature, sharp, commanding, and unshakable. She raised me in her own image. Neat handwriting, straight posture, top grades, and proper manners. There was a right way to do everything, and Loretta knew it. So I thought I knew what to expect. I thought the will would confirm what we'd both assumed for years, that I, as his only child, would inherit everything he left behind. The lawyer cleared his throat, his voice steady but cautious. "As per your father's wishes," he began, flipping through the papers in front of him. "His estate and all financial assets will go to Brenna." There was a pause. For a second, I thought maybe I hadn't heard him correctly. "Who?" The word shot out of my mouth before I could stop it. He looked up from the papers. "Brenna is your father's other daughter." I blinked, frozen. "Sister? I have a sister?" Before I could process it, Loretta's voice rang out, sharp and furious. "Impossible!" Her hand slapped the armrest. "This must be a mistake. My son couldn't have left everything to some stranger." The lawyer didn't flinch. "It's no mistake, ma'am. Your son's instructions were very clear. Brenna inherits the house, the bank accounts, and all of his investments." I sat still, the air feeling heavier with every word. A sister, a whole other daughter, someone I had never heard about, never seen, never known even existed. Loretta's voice rose in disbelief. "You're telling me that child, someone we've never met, gets it all? While Mona, his only daughter, is left with nothing?" But I barely heard her now. My head was spinning and my eyes were fixed on the page in front of the lawyer. My fingers felt cold. Loretta's hand reached out and gripped mine tightly, snapping me out of my daze. Her grip was strong, like it had always been. Like she was trying to remind me who I was, who we were. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. About Brenna. A stranger had stepped into my life without warning, and everything I thought I knew, about my father, about my family, about my future, suddenly didn't make sense anymore. "We'll fix this, Mona. We'll find this Brenna and make sure she does what's right." Those were my grandmother's exact words, spoken with cold confidence. Her grip on my shoulder was firm, her voice low but sharp. I didn't say much, in response, just nodded like I always did. There had never been much room to disagree with Loretta. She expected obedience, and I had always given it to her. A few days later, I followed her instructions and drove to Brenna's house. I didn't know what to expect. I had never even seen a picture of her. Just a name on a piece of paper that turned my life upside down. The house looked tired, like it had lived too many seasons. It was small and leaned slightly to one side, with faded blue paint peeling off the wood like dried skin. It reminded me of something left out in the sun too long. Before I could even raise my hand to knock, the front door creaked open. A girl, young woman really, stood there smiling at me. Her smile was wide, almost too wide, and her arms hung loosely at her sides. Her fingers twisted together over and over again like they had a mind of their own. "Hi," she said brightly, her voice light and musical, like a song playing in the background. "I saw you coming. Did you park by the mailbox? It's wobbly. I keep meaning to fix it," but she trailed off, her eyes flicking toward the edge of the doorframe. Then she tapped it 3 times with her knuckles, a quick, quiet rhythm. Yeah, I replied, caught off guard. "I'm Mona, your sister." "Come in," she interrupted, stepping to the side to let me through, though she didn't meet my eyes. "Watch the floorboard near the kitchen. It squeaks." Inside the house was small and warm. It smelled faintly of clay and earth, like a garden after rain. The narrow hallway opened into a kitchen, but it wasn't an ordinary one. A long workbench stretched along the far wall, cluttered, with half-finished pottery. There were jars of paint, brushes, tools I couldn't name, and pieces in all stages of creation, some drying, some still soft and waiting. Brenna moved to the window and started rearranging a group of mismatched vases on the sill. She adjusted their positions 3 times, muttering quietly to herself. Finally, she gave a small nod, satisfied, and turned back toward me. Her smile was still there, as if nothing had happened. "You're my sister." "Yes," I said slowly, trying to read her expression. "Our father, he passed away recently." She didn't look sad. Her smile stayed in place. "What's it like? Having a dad?" I hesitated. "It's hard to say. He was kind. He cared. We were friends." Brenna nodded thoughtfully, her fingers tapping softly against her thighs. "I never met him, but I have his hands." She held up her palms. They were lightly dusted with clay, creases filled with the soft beige powder. "Mom always said so. Big hands like him. There was no bitterness in her voice, no trace of anger or blame, just a quiet certainty. Her sincerity caught me off guard. I had expected her to be defensive, maybe even hostile, but instead she welcomed me like I had always been a part of her life. "Dad left me a gift," she said suddenly. "A gift?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, her expression calm. "Yes, he called it that. In the letter from the lawyer. Did he leave you anything else?" I asked, unsure of what I wanted to hear. "Did he leave you a gift too?" she asked, tilting her head to the side. I hesitated. Loretta's voice echoed in my head, cold and angry. "Not really," I said finally. "He didn't." "That's strange," Brenna said, still smiling. "Everyone should get a gift." I gave a weak smile back. "Maybe. You should stay for a week," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You can tell me about him." I wasn't sure what to say, but something about her openness, her innocence, made it hard to walk away. What he was like, what he liked to eat, what his voice sounded like. "A week?" I asked, surprised by how casually she said it. "I don't know if, in return," she cut in gently, "I'll share the gift. It's only fair." Her hands were twisting together again, fingers fidgeting in a quiet, nervous rhythm. She didn't look at me, just waited, calm but expectant. "I don't know if I have much to say about him," I replied slowly. But even as the words came out, I felt a small sting in my chest. I knew they weren't true. I did remember things. I remembered more than I thought I did. But, okay, a week. Her face lit up instantly. There was something so genuine, in her joy, so pure that it caught me off guard. "Good," she said, her voice soft with excitement. "We can have pancakes. Only if you like them, though." Then she turned back to her workbench, humming to herself as if the matter was settled. I stood there for a few seconds watching her. I knew what she meant by the gift. Loretta's plan had seemed so simple at first. Go there, talk to Brenna, convince her to do what was right. But Brenna's kindness, her strange warmth, was already making everything more complicated. That week in Brenna's home felt like stepping into a world that had nothing to do with mine. It was slower, softer, simpler. Like time moved differently. Like people breathed easier. Back home, breakfast usually meant a croissant from the bakery. On the corner, paired with a sharp, bitter latte in a sleek cup. Everything was fast and neat. But here, things were different. Breakfast was bacon, eggs, and a mug of tea. Sometimes toast. Always served on paper plates. "Easier this way," Brenna said one morning, sliding a plate across the small wooden table. "No big cleanup. Time saved is time for pottery." She said it without apology, without shame, just matter of fact, like a truth that didn't need defending. She had a way of saying things like that, clear and direct. It took me off guard every time, but I noticed the small things, how she set the plates down on the porch rail and then picked them up again, only to place them down once more, just slightly shifted. She did it until they were lined up just right. Then she nodded to herself and sat down. It was a ritual, quiet and careful. And I started to realize that everything she did had meaning. On the second morning after breakfast, she looked up and said, "Let's walk to the lake." Before I could say anything, she stepped out of her sandals and left them neatly by the porch steps. Then she walked barefoot into the grass. "It's better like this," she said simply. I followed her, slipping off my shoes. The morning dew clung to my feet, cold and sharp. Each blade of grass felt like a whisper, a reminder that I was in a different place now. She moved ahead, occasionally stopping to brush her fingers across leaves or to rearrange a pile of stones along the narrow path. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Those small, gentle actions seemed to calm her, like they were part of how she moved through the world. When we reached the lake, she crouched down at the water's edge and dipped her fingers into the surface. "You ever just sit and listen?" she asked without looking back. "To what?" I asked, standing behind her, feeling awkward. "Everything." Her answer hung in the air, soft and wide. The lake was still. The breeze was light. Somewhere in the trees, a bird chirped. We stayed there a while, not saying much, just being. By the third day, her studio had become the center of our time together. It was the heart of her home. The air inside always smelled like clay, damp, rich, and earthy. She handed me a lump of it that morning. "Here," she said, "try making something." I looked at the clay in my hands, unsure where to start. I pushed and pulled, but it kept slipping through my fingers. I tried shaping it into something, anything, but it kept collapsing. Eventually, it just slumped into a useless blob. "It's terrible," I said, sighing in frustration. "I can't do this." "It's not terrible," Brenna said gently. She moved closer, reaching for the clay. Her hands were sure and soft. "It's just new. New things take time." That's what Brenna said, her voice calm and steady, as she helped shape the clay in my hands. Her patience amazed me. She never lost her temper. Even when I spilled water across her workbench one afternoon, ruining one of her finished pottery pieces, she didn't raise her voice. I'd expected her to be upset, maybe even angry, but she just quietly grabbed a cloth and wiped the mess away. Then she carefully set the ruined piece aside, not saying a word. There was no blame in her eyes, just understanding. As the days passed, I started to relax. The tension I had always carried, the constant pressure to be perfect, slowly began to fade. In Brenna's home, I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel like I was failing some invisible test. But just when I started breathing easier, Loretta's phone calls became more frequent. It was like she could sense the change in me, like she knew I was slipping out of her grip. That night, her voice came through the line, sharp and cold. "Mona, what are you waiting for? This isn't a vacation," she said. "You need to take action." She doesn't know what to do with that kind of money. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the wall in front of me, my grip tightening around the phone. "She's naive, Mona," Loretta went on, her voice rising. "You need to convince her to sign it over. If persuasion doesn't work, then, well, figure something out. Use her trust if you have to." Her words stung. They felt so out of place in Brenna's quiet world, where everything was calm and kind. "I don't know, Grandma," I said finally, my voice low. "It's not as simple as you think." "It's exactly that simple," she snapped. "Don't get distracted by her little quirks. Focus, Mona. This is your future we're talking about." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that maybe Brenna deserved what she was given, that maybe she wasn't the one who was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. So instead, I mumbled something vague and ended the call. That night, I sat alone for a long time. For the first time in my life, I started questioning why I was really there. The next morning, everything changed. Loretta arrived without warning. Her presence filled the small house like a storm sweeping through. Loud, cold, and impossible to ignore. Her heels clicked sharply against the uneven wooden floor as she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the space with thinly veiled disgust. "This is where you've been hiding?" she said, her voice sharp. "This mess?" Her gaze moved over Brenna's pottery studio. The shelves lined with clay figures, the paint-stained brushes, the unfinished pieces waiting for glaze. She turned to me. "How can you stand this, Mona?" Then she looked at Brenna. Her tone hardened. "And you," she said. "You have no right to what's been given to you." Brenna didn't respond right away. Her hands trembled as she reached for the vases on her workbench, moving them back and forth. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Gift, gift." She kept saying it over and over. Loretta ignored her. She stepped closer to me, lowering her voice just enough to seem controlled. "Mona, end this nonsense," she said. "She doesn't deserve your father's legacy. Her eyes narrowed. "She's not like us." That was the moment something shifted. "Gift," Brenna said louder. She pointed toward a small cabinet in the corner of the room. Her rocking grew faster, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron with more force. "Gift," she repeated again. The word seemed to carry weight, something more than just a name. For an inheritance. Something deeper, something important. And I knew then this wasn't just about money. There was something else, something I hadn't been told. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what I was about to find, but something in Brenna's voice, the way she had pointed to that cabinet, made me move. Slowly, I stepped forward and opened the small wooden door. Inside was a neat stack of old letters. Their edges were worn and yellowed with age, the paper soft and slightly curled. I could see they had been handled many times. Each one was addressed to my father in the same careful handwriting. The ink had faded, but the name was still clear. My breath caught in my throat. "What are those?" Loretta demanded sharply, stepping toward me. I picked up one of the envelopes and turned it over in my hands. "These are from Brenna's mother," I said softly, beginning to flip through them. Each letter carried a quiet sadness, a longing that reached across years. The words weren't just about love, they were about hope, a hope that never seemed to fade, no matter how much time passed. "Did you know?" I asked, looking directly at Loretta. She didn't answer at first. Her face turned pale, but only for a second. Then her expression shifted, hardening like stone. "I did what I had to," she snapped. "Do you think I would let some woman trap my son with a broken child?" Her voice was sharp, filled with cold fury. "When she came looking for him, I told her to stay away. I refused to let her or her daughter become part of this family." Her words hit the room like a slap. Brenna clung to the edge of the table, her fingers digging into the wood. Her wide eyes stayed locked on Loretta, unmoving and afraid. She didn't say a word, just stood there, trembling slightly. I turned back to Loretta. My voice trembled as I spoke, but I didn't back down. "You destroyed this family," I said. "You never even told him he had another daughter. You made that decision for him." Loretta's bitter laugh echoed through the room. It was sharp and angry. "He found out," she spat. "That's why he changed his will. And now you're just letting her take everything." But then, from the side of the room, Brenna spoke. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Dad left a gift," she said. "He wanted me to have it." I turned to her, her quiet strength anchoring me. Then I looked back at Loretta. "This isn't about money, Grandma," I said. "It never was. And I won't let you take anything else from her. Not now, not ever." For a long second, Loretta stared at me, her eyes cold and full of disbelief. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed felt heavy at first, like the house itself was trying to breathe again. I looked at Brenna. "I'm so sorry," I said. My voice was thick with emotion. "I love you, sis." She didn't answer at first. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something far away. Then she asked, as if nothing had just happened, "Do you want pancakes?" The suddenness of the question made me laugh through the tears. "Oh," I said, wiping my eyes. "I really do." We sat together on the porch, sharing a plate of pancakes as the sun dipped low in the sky. The light turned soft and golden, stretching across the yard and spilling into the house. The sky was painted in pinks and oranges, like a watercolor that hadn't quite dried. From that day on, we started building a life together. I helped Brenna grow her little pottery studio. We spent hours shaping clay, mixing paints, and setting finished pieces in the sun to dry. I found peace in those quiet moments. We fixed up the house, one small thing at a time, a new coat of paint on the walls, fresh flowers planted by the steps, curtains that fluttered in the breeze. And somehow, in the middle of all of that, I rediscovered something I thought I had lost. My love for painting returned. I started decorating Brenna's pottery with careful brush strokes, adding little touches of color and detail. It felt natural, like breathing. Word started to spread. People came from nearby towns, curious to see our work. Some stayed to talk. Others came back with friends. The studio that once felt like a quiet hiding place became something more. A place full of life. No, life wasn't perfect. We had our share of hard days, but it was ours. We were free to make our own choices, at our own pace. And for the first time, I wasn't living to meet someone else's expectations. I was living for us, Brenna and me.